Welcome to an RPG in a Box Basics video tutorial. In this video, we're going to talk about combat. I'm going to show you how to set up all the different types of combat there are in RPG in a Box, so that you know, depending on which system you want to use, how you can get a battle going. This isn't going to go into any great detail on how to structure battles and how to make things like a difference between melee and ranged or anything like that. It's just how to get combat working in RPG in a Box and all the different options that you have available to you for combat. So as I say, this is just a basics video just to quickly go over predominantly the combat tab, what all the options are and how to set things up. Okay, so there are 3 different types of combat in RPG in a Box, depending on which one you want to use. There's real-time combat, which means the combat happens outside on the playable map that you're currently walking around on. It's battles, which will typically load a different map, but you can also load the same one. It's all part of the settings that you set up, but you can have it load a different map, and it's turn-based. So you will move, and then the enemy will move, you will attack, the enemy will attack. So if it's all done in turns, then you have menu-based turn-based battles. So they're more like options on the screen that you can pick with text and again move in turns and attack in turns. So I will show you all of those plus a few extra things as well in this video. So let's start with real-time combat. How do you start a real-time combat? So I've placed a goblin NPC on the map to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the edit tool, and I'm going to click on the goblin, and then in the properties for the goblin you will see a few important settings. You will see in the behavior section, you will see this option here, attackable in real time. This is what governs if this NPC can be used in real-time combat or not. If we turn this on, it can now be used in real-time combat. And you'll see this sword icon will appear above the NPC's head. That's an indication that it's set to attackable in real time, and that it will be a real-time attackable enemy. The next thing it does is it makes these options available. If you turn this off, those options are not there. Turn it on, these 3 options will appear. So the first important option is the hostility setting. You can set whether this thing is an enemy, in other words, it's always hostile, whether it's only hostile if you attack it, so it starts peaceful, and then if you attack it, it will become aggressive, or never hostile. So if you attack it, it will just be passive all the time until you kill it, right? So depending on which one you take will suit the requirements that you have. So always hostile is, typically what you'd use for an enemy, right? So if we leave this as always hostile, then the loot drops option, we don't have any at the moment, but if you were to go into the combat editor, which we'll get to in a moment, and you would set up some loot drops, once you've set them up, they'll be available to select from here, and then this will allow you to specify what the enemy drops when it's killed in a real-time combat. And then the last option for this is experience points, where you can set how much experience the player gets for leveling up on this particular kill. Okay? If you want something to happen when the NPC is killed, you can put a script in the on death event. So run script, instead of do nothing, you'd say run script, and then you'd write a script in the visual script editor. So you'd come over to here and you'd create your script for death, something like that. You give it a better name than that, but you then go into the visual script editor. You could have a message pop up when you kill the enemy, or you could have a quest gets completed using the complete quest event or action, or whatever it is you want to do, whether it's give item or drop loot or whatever. You can script anything to happen when an enemy is killed. And that script will then, as I say, go into here. So you assign death to this script for the on death event. Okay, we're not going to bother with that though, so we're going to do nothing on death. But now if we go into game, we should see that this goblin is attackable and will start to attack us, and we can attack it back in real time. Notice how the sword icon appears above the goblin's head. When we mouse over it, that means we can attack it, and it just hit us just a moment ago. So let's go and attack it. You can see the health bar appear. Now, you might notice a couple of things there. When we were attacking the goblin and when the goblin was attacking us, we were flashing white. If you want to change that, that is found in the combat tab, and it's this option here, damage shake / flash. If we turn that off and save and play again, now we're not flashing white, neither is the goblin when we attack it. Okay? Now, the reason I show that is not only you might not want to use the white flash, but some people notice that the white flash gets stuck sometimes and the character remains white, whether it's the player or whether it's the enemy gets stuck in a sort of white look. If that's the case, it's usually because you've got missing animations. Combat requires a few key animations, and if they're not named and they're not set up, it can result in the player getting stuck in a white glow. Easiest solution, though, is to just turn this off, and then that won't happen ever at all. But it just means you're not going to flash white either. So if you like the aesthetic of the characters flashing white when you hit them, then you are going to have to fix the issue with your animations. But if you don't care about the flashing white anyway, you can just turn it off, and then you don't even have to worry about getting stuck with the character being all white. But it's just important to know, before we move any further, that the key animations that you need for combat are the following. You need an animation called attack, and it needs to have at least 2 frames in it. You need an animation called death. It needs to have at least 2 frames in it. You need your idle animation and your walk animation, which should be set up anyway if you've got a working character, but they should at least have 2 frames of animation in them. I think they're the main ones. So as long as you've got a attack with at least 2 frames of animation, as long as you've got a death with at least 2 frames of animation, and as long as you've got an idle with at least 2 frames of animation, and as long as you've got a walk with at least 2 frames of animation, then you shouldn't have the issue of the white getting stuck on the player once they've finished a fight or during a fight, okay? But if you find that still happening anyway, as I say, you can go into the combat tab and you can just turn this option off, okay? There was something else I was going to say about animations, but I can't immediately think what it was. Oh yes, and these animations should be set on the enemy as well. So the goblin, this one probably doesn't have them all. No, it doesn't have a death. You'll notice when you killed the goblin, it just disappeared. But what you really should do is give your enemies a death animation. I think the slimes have one, for example. Yes, they have a death animation. So just make sure that you go through and give your enemies death animations, because if there are any animations missing that combat uses, like death and what's the goblin got? Attack, idle and walk. If those are missing at all during combat, then it can result in glitchy behavior, such as the flash getting stuck. So if you want the flash and it's getting stuck, make sure you've really properly set up all the animations that you need for combat, okay? And if that fails, then you can turn it off here if it's getting too annoying, okay? So with that said, that's real-time combat. Now, it's important to mention that with real-time combat, what I've had to do is I've had to set it on this particular goblin. So if I add another goblin, notice how that one's not attackable in real time, and neither is that one, and neither is that one, and neither is that one. So what if I wanted an army of goblins that are all attackable in real time? Does that mean I've got to now select each one and repeat this process of going attackable in real time, always hostile, click this one, attackable in real time, turn that on, click this one? Do I have to keep doing this for every single goblin? No, the answer is no. If you know that the goblin is always going to be an enemy, and therefore you want it to default to being attackable in real time and being hostile, what you can do is go to the game configuration section, look for the behaviors tab down the side here and create a custom behavior. So click this plus icon. We'll call this Goblin. And then you can set up in here the options that you want all of one type of character to have, to inherit. So in this case, what do we want for the Goblin? We want it to be attackable in real time, and it should always be hostile. We could even set up loot drops and experience points, and every Goblin will have these settings. So every Goblin will give you 25 experience when you kill it. Every Goblin, when you kill it, will run the same script, etc., 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 right? You set it once here, and you can apply this to all Goblins, okay? So let's leave it as not running a script when you kill them. Let's just make it so that when you kill a Goblin, when you place a Goblin, it's always attackable and it's always hostile, okay? So we've created this behavior that does that, and we'll save it. So we'll click OK. And then you open the Goblin in the voxel editor, and then scroll down to where it says default behaviors. And then as long as you've saved your one you made in game configuration, you drop this down and it will be here, Goblin. Select that, save your model. And now when you go to the map editor, every time you place a Goblin down, you see how it's got a sword icon above it? Because it's every Goblin now has that behavior. So if we go into the settings, you can see that it's already attackable with hostile. And if we'd saved the experience points, I didn't bother in the end, but they'd all have 25 experience points assigned to them as well. So for example, let's create one more. Let's go to the game configuration. Let's go to behaviors and add another one, which we'll call Bat. And we can say attackable in real time. It's only hostile if you attack it. And it gives you 5 experience points when you kill it. And when you kill it, it runs a script. And let's just say we had a script called on death. Okay? Click OK. And now every time we place a bat, we need to open the bat first. Go to its behavior, drop this down, select bat, and then save it. And now in the map editor, every time we place a bat, see how it's got a sword icon above its head because it's got attackable in real time on. But it doesn't mean it's hostile, it just means it's attackable in real time. But now if we select one of the bats and look at its settings, we can see it's attackable in real time, only if it's attacked, giving us 5 experience, and it's got the script assigned to it. And that's the same for every single one of these bats. So if you want settings to be applied across all of the enemies that you place, actually set them on the enemy itself in the voxel editor. But in order to be able to do that, you need a behavior that's been pre-created in this section of the editor. Okay, so you go through here, set up behaviors for your enemies, and then when you open your enemy in the voxel editor, you can assign it to that model directly, so that every instance of that model you place will inherit that behavior instead of having to set it per enemy on the map once you've placed it. Does that make sense? So that's attackable in real time. It's very simple to set up. And obviously, let's just quickly go to the combat tab and let's quickly take a look at loot drops. So if we add a quick loot drop, we'll call it bat drop. So we can set something up for when you kill the bat, for example. Available items. If you've got any items created in your item editor, I have a couple here. You can specify which items should be given to the player. So let's say for whatever reason, the bat drops a shovel and then you click on where it says shovel and then it'll bring up these options on the side. This is the chance. So 100% means it's always going to drop a shovel, whereas 50% means there's going to be times where it won't drop a shovel. And if you set it to 10%, then it's, going to be very rare that it drops a shovel, but occasionally it will, that sort of thing, right? Then you can set either a fixed amount. So, there's a 10% chance it's going to drop 5 shovels, right? If the 10% doesn't succeed, so in other words, you hit the 90%, it's not just going to drop a different amount, it's going to drop no shovels, okay? So it's either 10% to drop 5 or 90% to drop nothing, okay? So it's either 5 or nothing, okay? You're never going to have a sort of 90% where it drops 3, but there's a 10% it might drop 5. That's not what it's about 10% to drop anything, and then you're specifying the amount that it drops. Does that make sense? So that's the fixed, however, but you could also say a range. And if you say range, you get a min and a max. So you could say there's a chance it could drop 1 shovel, but it could also drop 3. So then you've got a random range. So at 10%, it might drop 1 shovel, or it might drop 2, or it might drop 3, okay? But it's never going to drop 4 or 5 or anything like that. But if it hits the 90%, then it's just going to flat out drop nothing, okay? You can also add currency to a loot drop by clicking this button here. If you click that, and then if you've set up any custom currency, which we'll cover in a later video, for now we'll just use the base. So you click currency base, and then you can set again by clicking here the chance that it drops currency, and again whether it's a fixed amount of currency, so it gives you 50 coins or something, or whether it's a range between 10 coins and 50. Yeah, and then again, as I say, the percentage. Okay, and then you click generate loot, and that's just generate loot. Doesn't generate loot for the drop, it just gives you an example of what it will drop. So you can see this is basically every time you click this button, it's simulating a loot drop. So you can see how often, for example, it's dropping a shovel. So you can see it's currently, because the currency is at 100%, it's always dropping currency no matter what. But because the shovel is 10%, you see there's quite a few times where I'm clicking this where it's not dropping the shovel. So it allows you just to see, if you're, without having to play your game, you're just simulating a drop system to see how often. There you go. So it's now dropped a shovel, and it's only dropped 1. Okay, so it's using that range. And now it's not dropping shovels again. Now it's dropped 1 again. So it just allows you to simulate what this loot drop is going to do when it's in game, and how often you get things and the amounts that you get. So you can see the effects immediately here, and then fine tune it if you're not happy with the results. Okay, so there you go. So we got 3 shovels in that case and 33 gold coins. Okay, once you're happy with the loot drop, in this case bat drop, you can then go to the real-time combat settings, the behavior for your goblin, and then loot drop, set it to how did I not save it? Helps if you save the combat editor. Click to save, make sure it's saved, obviously. Then when you go to your behavior settings, now loot drop should have bat drop, so I can set that on my bat. So now every time I place a bat down, obviously because I've changed this setting since placing the bats, these ones are not going to have that change. Notice how the loot drop is still none on these bats, but if I place a new bat, this one will have bat. Oh no, because I didn't save it on the let me just check something for a minute. Did I put it on? I put it on goblin. Sorry, I put it on the wrong one. So yeah, let's just rewind that for a second. Let's click a goblin. You can see, oh, it has actually affected the goblin. That's good. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was going to actually add it after the fact to the goblins as well, the ones you've already placed, but it does, so that's good. I added it to the wrong one, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. You create a loot drop, and then you assign it to this section for the enemy, and then it will now, when you kill that enemy, it will drop 100% chance of currency and a 10% chance of 1 to 3 shovels in this case. Yeah. So that's real-time combat. That's about as much as there is to talk about with that, because once you've set it up, that's how it works. You fight them on the map and kill them there and then. So let's go into some of the other combat editor settings, however, because there's more to talk about in regards to real-time combat before we move on. So let's just save the map quickly and go back to the combat editor. This is the main section where you'll set up combat for your game. Even in some cases when you're using real-time combat, you'll still use the combat editor for some things. But certainly if you're using tactical, turn-based or menu-based combat, you'll be predominantly using this screen here a lot. This is where you can set things like your cooldown for the player and cooldown for the NPCs when it comes to attack. You can set if you've got ranged weapons for your real-time combat, whether it's every time you click or whether it's automatic. So when you click on the enemy, you'll automatically keep shooting. I think that's how it works. Otherwise, single means every time you click, it will reshoot the weapon. Then you've got your sound effects. So when you damage something, when you miss something, when something dies, these are the sound effects you can you can assign and obviously use the sound effect generator to create the sounds, or import your own as WAV format. You can assign them then here. This is where you can turn off obviously the flash for when you kill an enemy or damage it. And then remove defeated enemies. If this is ticked, then when it kills an enemy, it will remove it. So to give you a practical example of that in a second, we'll use the purple slime because it has a death animation, okay? Anything that doesn't have a death animation, like the goblin, it's going to get removed regardless because it doesn't have a visible frame at that point to... well, actually, it might just stay on screen. Let's try this. Let's turn this on for a minute. I'm just curious. We'll turn that... remove defeated enemies, we'll turn that off. And what we'll do is we'll go back to the map editor. We'll put the goblin down. And we'll put purple slime down over here as well. And we'll set that quickly to attackable in real time. As I'm only placing one of them, I will just do it manually. So let's just see what happens when we kill the goblin. I can. There we go. Yeah, so it's going to disappear regardless because it doesn't have a death animation. However, this slime does have a death animation, and we said to not remove enemies when they're defeated. So let's take out the slime if we can. And there you go. You see how once the death animation's finished playing, it stays on that last frame. And although the enemy is not active, it's not there anymore, it remains, the body remains on screen, as it were, so you can leave it there. However, if you have this option on and we save it, and let's just get rid of the goblin now so it's not in the way. Now if we attack the goblin, that's the slime, sorry. Let's wait till it's in view a bit better. Let's rotate. There you go. Notice how as soon as it's played its death animation, it also gets removed. So that's what that option does. If you want to remove the defeated enemies, then leave that ticked. If you want them to stay on the battlefield, as it were, then don't untick that. Untick that, sorry. Let's quickly talk about some of these options down here. So we've got an enemies section. So what you would do is you click add enemy and we give it a name. So let's say goblin, or let's do bat. And then you specify the model. So in this case, SK bat. So you drop that down. And then you'd say the experience points that you get for killing the bat. So let's say 10. And then if you've got any loot drops, you would add them into here. You would drag them from here. So let's just quickly set one up. Again, bat drop. And let's just say it drops a shovel. And then we can drag that into there. And now this bat, this loot drop is 50% chance of dropping. Now, it's important to note that there's a difference between the 50% here and the 50% here. They are compounded, okay? They are separate things and they're compounded on top of one another, okay? This is the chance for this loot drop to drop this item. This is the 50% that a bat just drops this drop in general, okay? So, although this is at 100%, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a shovel because there's a 50% chance it just doesn't drop anything. Right? It just doesn't do the bat drop. So, whereas if we flip these round 100%, but then set this to 50%, then now it's the opposite. It's always going to drop something, but if there's a 50% chance that the only thing that it drops doesn't drop, then again, you don't get anything, right? So the drop triggered, but it didn't drop anything because the drop itself had a 50% chance to not drop anything. If we had currency in here as well that was 100%, then you would get currency regardless because you're always going to get the drop, and the drop is always going to give you at the very least currency. But if this was back at 50%, there's a chance you might not get anything because although currency is set to 100%, again, this drop, there's a 50% chance the bat just won't drop anything at all, right? It just won't do this, right? So just understand that this percentage is separate from the percentage of the items. These are the percentages on each individual item of this drop. And this is the percentage of the likelihood of this drop just even happening. That makes sense? So that's how to set up an enemy. Won't bother with the loot drop now. We've explained that. So we'll delete that. You can just press delete to delete an individual drop from here. So this is how you set up an enemy. Now, why would you want to set up an enemy this way as opposed to what we've been doing so far with the map? This is for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is how you set up enemies for tactical turn-based and menu battles, which we'll get to in a moment. But this is also how you set up enemy spawns, okay? What are enemy spawns and what are random encounters? So let's start with enemy spawns. What we'll do is we'll click add and we'll create an enemy spawn, which we'll call bat spawn. See, as we're setting up bats for this example. And then in the possible events, it wants us to drop enemies. So here you would click and drag the bat that we created in the enemies section into here. What this will do is this will set up an enemy spawner and what enemies should it spawn and the percentage likelihood of that particular type of enemy spawning. So at this point in time, we've got bat 50%. So there's also a chance that it just won't spawn a bat, okay? But this is per tile that will spawn a bat. Let me show you what I mean. So we have a timer and I'll go over the timer in a minute. Here's the chance. So we could say 100%. So you're always going to guarantee a bat. But let's do 50%. So there's a 50% chance you get a bat, 50% chance you don't. And then here's the important bit. We have the limit. So limit is when we define a spawn area, how many of this enemy within that spawn area should we have at one time? So if we said 10, then that means that depending on, this will also depend on how many tiles you have in the spawn area. And this will make more sense. We haven't set up a spawn area yet, and that's part of the process. But if we said 10, then we're going to need at least 10 tiles because in order for, if this was 100%, which it's not anyway, so you probably wouldn't need 10 tiles anyway, but if you wanted to ensure 100% bats and you wanted 10 of them, you're going to need space for those 10 bats to be on screen. So they need a spawn area that can hold 10 bats, which means they need 10 tiles. Okay. Now, the timer is how long between spawning does it take to reach the limit. So if we set this to 1, then it's going to spawn a bat every second until it gets to 10. If we set this to 10, then every 10 seconds a bat spawns in up to a maximum of 10. This limit here, up to the maximum of the limit. Okay. If there's 50%, then obviously, although the timer is spawning a bat, it's actually a timer to check for a chance. So once 10 seconds are up, it then checks it checks the 50% again, and if it's not the right side of 50%, then it doesn't spawn a bat and then waits another 10 seconds and then checks that chance again. So it's actually not 10 to definitively spawn, it's 10 to check whether it will spawn, and it will use the percentage. Does that make sense? And then up to the limit again, okay? Now, where does this limit come from? So you can also put a script. Before we move on, let's mention this. You can also put a script on a spawn event. So every time a bat spawns, you can have something happen. So you would assign that there. There's a little information icon here that tells you that this will trigger each time an enemy spawns, and self will be a reference to the spawned entity. So any scripts you write, so I think, let's say we had def, for example, we went to the script editor. If we used, we edited this script and we said, play animation self and then spawn or something, self would then be a reference to the thing that's just spawned in. So it will play the spawn animation of that thing. Yeah. So in this case, slime, I think, has a spawn animation. So in this case, it would trigger that animation. So the slime will spawn in like that when it's spawned in, because we have a spawn script where the script states that, go back to the script editor, that it should play animation on self, which is the thing that's just spawned in, play the spawn animation. So it will play that animation on that object. Does that make sense? So that's what this is for. We'll set that to none for now. So on the map, editor, you can define areas. Let's get rid of this slime now. You can define areas where enemies will spawn at runtime. So they don't start on the map, but they spawn into the map. So for example, we could say that this area here is where slimes spawn, okay? Now, this is a 9 by 9 grid. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, okay? That means 9 slimes. If there was 100% chance, if a slime spawned here, 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 and here, that's 9 slimes. Now, if we go back to our enemy spawn, we have a limit of 10. That limit is not going to get ever reached because when it tries to place the 10th, there's no room in this area that we've made to hold those 10 slimes. If they're all in this area, unless, of course, they move. They can, obviously, everything that spawns usually has a behavior that governs its AI, so it moves around. So if one of the 9 slimes then moves away, opening up a tile for a 10th one to spawn, obviously that they can do that. But another thing that you could do is just add an extra grid, and now this is a spawn area that can hold the maximum amount that you've specified. Once you've defined your area, we're not finished yet because this in and of itself isn't going to do anything yet, but once you've defined your area where you want these slimes to spawn, or bats in this case, because I keep forgetting I've been setting up bats, you press the G key on the keyboard, and this will add them to a group. So we'll call these Bat Zone or something like that. Okay, now we've created a group called Bat Zone. So in the map editor, let's just make sure we've saved the combat editor. In the map editor, once you've created your group, in the general map settings, so make sure nothing's selected, scroll down to where you see your Bat Zone group. And here we have enemy spawn. Drop this down and your enemy spawn that you set up here will be in this drop-down list. Okay, so now you're defining that this group here produces this enemy type, this spawn. So now all of this, the 10 seconds, the 50%, the limit of 10, it's all going to happen in this area. Okay. Let's increase the chance just so we're not waiting 10 seconds and 50% and all of that. Let's make this so it's 100% chance to happen every 2 seconds until there's 10. Okay, and let's save and see what happens. So here we are in game, and if you pay attention over here, you can start to see every 2 seconds bats are spawning in on a vacant tile up to a limit of 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then no more should spawn because we've reached that limit of 10. Okay, and then obviously if you kill one, let's try and kill one without getting killed. Let's try to take this one out. We'll ignore that for a moment. Let's just try and take this bat out. Okay, another one should spawn in now because we depleted the number by 1, right? So there's always going to be 10 because the spawner remains active. Okay, so it's something that's always going to keep spawning in bats. But obviously they're not confined to that zone unless you want them to. That's something you can define in behaviors, but that's for another time. But you'll see that once they've spawned, they move around the map. So now they're spreading out. But that zone is where they spawn in from. Okay, so that's what spawns do. They're for spawning in real-time enemies that can be used on the map for real-time combat. Okay, let's delete that now so those bats aren't plaguing us every time we play the game. Now let's talk about random encounters. If we add a random encounter, again, let's call this bat encounter. Again, you add an enemy in. So bat, in this case. Oh no, it's a battle. Sorry, we need to set up a battle. So random encounters are for the other type of battle system, whether it's menu or tactical. So it makes more sense to come back to random encounters, actually, once we've discussed the other battle types. So how do you create, for example, a tactical turn-based battle? Let's start with that. So what you want to do for that is you want to add a battle. So you have to do this first. So you're going to click the Add Battle icon, and we'll call this Bat Battle, seeing as that seems to be what we're setting up here. And then you set what type of battle it is, whether it's tactical turn-based or whether it's menu-driven. We'll start with tactical and we'll come back to menu afterwards. Once you've chosen your battle type, you've then got your battle map. Now, if you've only got one map, then you can specify to reload that map and start the battle on that map. But what we could also do is just quickly throw together a quick battle map. So I'll just quickly do that. I'll just call it B map. And we'll just quickly throw together just an interesting shaped map for a battle. Doesn't really matter. It's just to throw something together that's a different map. Okay? Narrow corridors or something like that. Okay, that'll do. And we'll save that. This is now going to be our battle map. Okay, so in our combat editor, we specify that the battle should take place on the battle map. So you specify the map that you want the battle to take place. Then you have a player spawn option. This is where the player is going to spawn when the battle starts. You can specify random tile, in which case it will just pick somewhere, anywhere, any vacant tile on this that we've got available here in this shape, and it will put them either here, 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 here. It's just random, right? No control over it whatsoever. Or you can go to this option here and change it to random tile in group, and then you specify a group. So to do that, what you would do is you go to your map and let's say, oh, I want the player to spawn either here, 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 or here. So you select them, and very much like with the enemy spawn, you then add them to a group, and we'll call this player GRP, let's say, player group, okay? Then when you go to your, let's save it, when you go to your combat editor and you say, I want random tiling group for the player spawn rather than just a random tile, I want random tiling group, you then specify the group. In this case, it was player GRP. Make sure this is the same name as the group, otherwise it won't do anything, okay? Then you've got your enemies that you want to appear in this tactical turn-based battle. In this case, we want the bat. So let's drag and drop. You need to create the enemies here. So if you don't have them created in here, you're not going to be able to use them. So you have to drag them from this list over to here and let go. Then you've got the details for your enemy once you've added them. So in this case, the bat, we can set whether there's just one bat or whether there's always 10 bats or whether it's a range like it is with the loot drop. So every time you have this battle, there's either 3 bats or it could go up to a maximum of 6 or whatever, right? You can specify a range or a fixed amount. Then you've got the same setting for the enemy as you have the player spawn. You could say random tile, in which case it will just randomly distribute the enemy around the map. I don't think it places them in the player group though. I think if there is a player defined group, it ignores that so that you're not too close to an enemy. But I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate or not. So you might find that it does occasionally place an enemy in there, but I don't think it does. Or what you can do is you can specify again a random tile, and then you'd set up a group where you want the bats to spawn. So for example, if we wanted a battle where the player starts here and all the bats are over there, then we can select all of this area, hit the G key, create a bat zone over here, and then again, save the map, go to your combat tab, enemies should spawn in a group, bat zone. So now all the bats are going to be confined to this area up the top. The player's going to start down here. Otherwise, you can say the player spawns randomly somewhere on this map, as do all the bats, right? That's what these settings here are all about. So I'm going to ignore the groups, actually. So I'm going to go back to the map editor and delete these groups. So delete that group and delete that group. And we'll just randomly distribute the player and the bats around. Go back to the combat editor. Set this to random tile, set this to random tile. So the player's just going to spawn somewhere, the bats are just going to spawn somewhere. And we'll make this a fixed range, and we'll just have 2 bats, just to keep the battle simple for the video, okay? But you can set up the battles as you want them. Then you can set up a victory script. So this is what happens if you win the battle and have things happen, or defeat. What happens if you lose the battle? You can set scripts onto these events, and then those will get triggered as and when the battle occurs, when it's either won or defeated. These scripts happen at different times during a turn-based battle. Pre-battle, this script gets triggered just before the battle starts. So once the map's loaded, but it hasn't started yet, that is where you would set a script if you want that to occur at that moment. Pre-round is just before a round starts. Now, a round, it's important to know that a round consists of starting with the player first, then it goes to any party members that the player has in their group, and then any enemies. And then that's considered the end of a round, and then it goes back round to the player again on the next round. So pre-round basically means this happens before the player goes and all the other characters go. Pre-turn is before each person's go. So if you had a pre-turn script, this will trigger before the player goes, then it will trigger before the party member goes, then it will trigger before the next party member goes, and then it will trigger before the first enemy goes, and then it will trigger before the next enemy goes. This is going to happen between every single person's turn. And then post is just the opposite of all of those. So post-battle is something that happens at the end of the entire battle. So not necessarily, this will happen regardless of victory or defeat. This will just happen at the end of the battle in general. Post-round will happen at the end of every round. So at the end of the last enemy's go, before it goes back to the player, that's when this will trigger. And post-turn will happen at the end of every person's turn. Okay? Now, there are some built-in variables that you can use, but forgive me, I don't know them off the top of my head, so I will add them into the video as text as I'm talking so that you can see what they are with explanations of them. But I just, at this point in time as I'm speaking, I don't have them to hand without looking them up. But there are some built-in ones like $round, which will tell you what the round number is. $turn might even tell you how many turns you've had. I think there's even ones for whose turn it is, you know, the NPC or character whose turn it is and things like that. So you can use these things to help you script some interesting tactical turn-based battle scenarios, okay, to customize things a little bit. Each of these events that you can assign scripts to also work with the menu-driven turn-based. So whether you're using tactical or menu-driven, these events can be used on both of them, okay? So if you want to have something happen each turn, or something happen before each turn, or something happens at the end of battle, and that can happen either in menu or tactical turn-based. It's also important to note that things like the post-battle script are triggered before the victory and defeat scripts. So what will typically happen is you'll have the post-battle script will run immediately when the battle ends. So as soon as the last enemy is killed, or as soon as the last player is killed, whatever. If you've got party members you can play as, then obviously you can continue fighting the battle. So as soon as it either ends in defeat or what would be a victory, then that's when the post-battle script will be triggered. So let's say, for example, you kill all the enemies on a turn-based map. It will run that immediately while you're still on the map, okay? Then what will happen is it will then load map, taking you back to the map you triggered the battle from, whether it's the same map or a different one. Once you're back on that secondary map, that's when it will trigger the one of these, depending on what was the case. Did you win or did you lose? Okay, so it's important to know that because these scripts will trigger while you're back on the original map. Whereas this one will trigger while you're still in the battle immediately the moment it finishes, okay? And it can finish either because of defeat or loss. It doesn't matter. This script will trigger immediately when the battle is over, okay? Another thing that's important to mention about these scripts before we move on is that you can only assign, these are global, okay, so you can only assign one script per one of these events. So you can't create a different battle. Let's say, slime battle, and then have separate scripts for this one compared to this one. That's not going to work, okay? So if you want to have a script that checks which battle these scripts are taking place in, that's where you can use the $battle_name built-in variable. So you can have a script, for example, every turn, and what that script can do is query if $battle_name equals, and then you can give it this name, and then it will know whether you're in that particular battle, okay? So just so you're aware, that's how that works. We'll probably revisit these particular events in a much more detailed video, really this is just to introduce the fact that they're here. If you want to script things for menu or tactical turn-based battles, this is where you can change some of the things or add some functionality to your battles. Okay? So random encounters, we'll come back to this now. Now that we've set up a battle, how do you trigger it? There's two ways of triggering a menu or tactical turn-based battle. One is random encounters. So random encounters, what we'll do is we'll add one and we'll call this bat encounter. And then you can drag and drop a battle. So in this case, we've got bat battle. So we'll drag this down, use the scroll wheel, drop that there, and then you've got a percentage chance of this battle occurring. And again, that's per tile in the group. So for example, let's say we had a group in our overworld map, which we've got, I think. We've got one called Bat Zone, yeah? So let's say we create a group of tiles just here, just in this gap. There's 4 of them. We add them to a group, and we call this Danger Zone, let's say, okay? There's 4 tiles, okay? If we set, let's just save that. If we set this group, so let's just select Danger Zone. We might need to save the combat tag first. Once we've saved our random encounter, we reselect our group, and where it says random encounter, we can set bat encounter. So now we've assigned this group of tiles to the bat encounter. So when you step on one of those 4 tiles, it will trigger a chance that you enter into a battle, and that battle being this one up here, okay? Now we've set this to 10%, right? So that means every tile, every one of these 4 tiles, every time you walk on a tile in this group, there's a 10% chance you'll trigger a battle with a bat at some point, okay? So if we step on this tile and nothing happens, right? You then step on this tile, nothing happens. You then step on this tile, something happens. You suddenly enter into a battle with a bat. Then after that battle, you step on this tile, nothing happens. Step on this tile, then you enter into a battle with a bat. That's going to kind of be how it is. But 10%, it's going to be it's going to be less likely that you enter into a battle with the bat. However, obviously, if you set this to 100%, then it basically means that while you're walking through these 4 tiles, let's go back to the map editor, every time you step on one, you're going to get a battle with a bat. So that means you'll walk along here, and then as soon as you step on this tile, you get into a battle with a bat. And then once you've finish that battle and you're back on the map, you step on this tile, again, you're going to be into a battle with a bat, because each of these tiles has a 100% chance while you're in this area to have a battle with a bat. So this is going to be battle with a bat, 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 battle with a bat. As long as you're in this zone, every time you move, until you step out of the zone, you're always going to be having a battle with a bat because, or entering into a tactical turn-based battle anyway, because this is 100% per tile, okay? So just bear that in mind. So if you don't want to have every time you step on a tile within a zone for a battle, you want to sort of drop the percentage chance to cater for that, yeah? So that's what random encounter does. It just means that while you're walking around the map and you step into a set of tiles where there's a percentage chance for a battle, if it hits that percentage, it will then load into the battle map and you'll have to fight those enemies. Once you've finished killing those enemies, the battle ends, you'll come back to the map on the tile that you were on, and then you can continue walking. And again, you'll step onto the next tile, and if it's within that zone, it will then do its own calculation for the percentage chance, and if it hits again, you'll have another battle, right? So if we make this 100% for now, and save it and play, you'll see what it does. So here we are in game. So currently nothing's happening, but as soon as I step on this tile, because it's 100%, we go into a battle, and we can move, attack the bat, and then end your turn. The bats will then move. Ignore these errors. The bat has some built-in errors for the asset library, so just ignore those. And then let's just try and finish this battle as quickly as we can so we can get back to the map. Okay, we're back on the map, but again, because we're still within the zone, if we step forward again, we're going to have another battle because every tile within that group has 100% to have another battle, right? So that's what random encounters do, okay? Let's get rid of those now. We don't need to use those. The other way of starting a battle is to do it via a script. So whether you want to start it with dialogue or start it when you step on a tile, what you'll do is you'll make a script and you'll use the start battle actually. And then you'll specify your battle name here. So we've got one called battle. All your battle names will be a drop-down list. So at this point in the script, it will start that battle. Okay. So if we save this, for example, and assign it to a hotkey, so let's go to input bindings and just add a key, let's say R, and run script battle, or where did I put it? I didn't save the script. That would help. Let's go to the script editor. Oh, it's this, the def script. Okay. So we'll go back to the input bindings, add R, run script, def. Okay. And now every time we press R, it's going to start this battle. Yeah. So I just press the R key and we're now in battle. So those are the two ways of triggering a tactical turn-based battle, whether it's random encounters or scripted encounters. Okay. And then we have menu-driven turn-based battles. How do those work? So again, they use a battle map. So you can either specify the overworld if you want it to take place on the same map you're on, or you can specify loading into a map specific for that battle. You've got your victory scripts and your death scripts for when you win or lose a menu-based battle, and then you've got your enemies for the menu-based battle. However, for menu-driven combat, it's all done by a menu, obviously, given the name, and text options that you have on the screen. Now, this is where you can define what those text options look like and what options you have available to you. So you can leave it as default, in which case you'll have the default menu, or we can click custom, and then we can add or change our own options. If we leave this as default for now, you can see that this is interesting. You have to actually click them first before they appear. So it's good job I did that. So if you don't see anything here, make sure you just go back and forth between these and it'll make them appear. But these are the inbuilt ones. So we've got attack, use skill if you've got one, do nothing, or flee. Okay. And in custom, this will allow you to select each one, change the name of it and what it does. Okay. Including run a script. So I think one of the actions is run a script. Yeah. And this will allow you to basically have anything happen, right? Because you can script it. So attack will obviously do the inbuilt attack action. You can change the name of it. So instead of attack, you could say fight. And now it will appear on screen as fight instead of attack. Use skill. That's the action. And then this is the text. So, you know, instead of skill, it could be use potion if that's what you're doing or whatever. Do nothing would be the action is pass. But you could say be a coward. You know, whatever you want to do, right? And then instead of flee, you could have run script. And then let's say the script was death and it was literally, you know, kills the player. You could say, you know, give up or something like that, right? So this is how you customize the menu, okay? And then if we save that, we've got our menu battle set up. Same thing again. How is it triggered? Is it a random encounter or is it started by our script? In this case, we'll leave it as we've got it set up at the moment, where the R key runs this script and this script starts the battle. So let's go and see what this does. So here we are in game. If I press the R key, here we are in the battle and we've got our options: fight, be a coward, or give up. Okay. Now fight is just rewording for attack, and we don't have the skill because we don't actually have any skills, so it doesn't show that option. We haven't set those up. Be a coward is obviously the do nothing, so it's just going to end our turn. And then give up is actually going to restart this battle because that's what the def script does. But if it wasn't programmed to start the battle but to kill the player or something, that's what give up would now do. Okay, so if we fight, we can then pick which bat we want to fight. So let's pick one. It will then attack that bat and that bat will attack us, and then it goes back round. That's how menu battles work. So if we give up, it should re-trigger this battle. Yeah? In this case, it's saying a battle is already active, so that won't actually work, but you can see it was trying to run that script. Okay, so that's how you change, and it's obviously bugged out now as well, But that's how you change the text of the menu, but also add your own options, right? So you're not just tied to the 4 that you have here. You can also add another one and add another one. You can have as many options as what can show, obviously, on a widget. So you might have a limit to what you can show, but you can at least add more than are there. And you can change the text and the actions for the ones that are there as well. Or if you just want the default, just tick that back and just use the inbuilt ones that are built in. Okay, so that is as thorough as I can be. I've gone over pretty much everything with the combat editor, and I've shown you how to set up menu-based, tactical-based, and real-time combat with all the options of the combat editor, as well as an introduction briefly into behaviors in here, as well as setting them up on the enemies themselves and how to set them on the map editor, how to set up loot drops. So hopefully you're pretty set up now with how to do battles of the various different forms. One last thing to mention as well, if you go to game configuration, you may not be aware of this, so I'll make you aware of it. If you go to game configuration, go to gameplay and go to mechanics, there's a free attack system, first of all, which is default or cursor guided. This will allow you, when you're freely attacking something, so free attack is when you don't have a target, you're just pressing the attack key. Default means it will just go where you're facing. Cursor guided means it will shoot at where your cursor is. So if you aim at something and then press the attack key, if it's a ranged weapon or whatever, it will go in the direction of your cursor. But this is the other thing that's worth mentioning, is the action system. By default, when you're walking around the map, it's real time. But you can also set it to roguelike. And what does that do? If we click OK and add our goblin back, okay, let's just see the difference here and how does this work. So now we're in a roguelike game, okay? Now, notice how the goblin is no longer moving, okay? But if I move, then the goblin moves, and we move at the same time. Every time I move, the goblin moves, okay? This is what roguelike is. It's where you move and it makes the enemies move, right? So they all move at the same time as one another. And then to attack, you just walk into the enemy. You don't click on them. You just literally walk in the direction. If you're, let's see if we can get a situation like that set up. Here we go. So now we're facing one another. To attack, I just move towards the enemy. So in this case, I just press the W key and I'll attack. He'll attack me. W again. If I step away, boom, right? That's the roguelike system. You can use that if you want. It's just a different way of using real-time combat, if that's... but it also affects movement as well. So it affects the entire game. But if that's the sort of system you want to use, you can use that as well. So it's important to mention that as well. That's found in game configuration, and that's the action system, roguelike. Or you can put it back to real time if that's what you would prefer. Okay? So there you go. So that will bring us to the end of this rather comprehensive video on the combat systems of RPG in a Box, but hopefully it's basic enough that it's giving you an introduction to all the facets of things that you can do with battles. Obviously, there's a lot to battles. There's all of these scripts you could dive into, and battles can get a little bit more complex than I've covered here today. We haven't talked about the different types of combat, such as melee or ranged or anything like that. I just wanted in this video just to show you, if you're a beginner to RPG in a Box, how do you even create battles? How do you set them up? So that's what this video should now put you in good stead to do. But if you have any questions about anything I've covered in this video, if anything's you're unsure about, or if you have any questions just in general about this, feel free to reach out on the Discord. But for now, that'll wrap up this video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.